Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions. The portfolio on this occasion is education and skills. A reminder that questions 2 and 7 have been grouped, and therefore I'll take any supplementaries after both substantive questions have been asked. Anybody looking for a supplementary should press the request to speak buttons during the relevant question. I call question number 1, Pam Gosal.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to update its guidance on the use of mobile phones in classrooms.
Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
The Scottish Government published updated mobile phone guidance in August. The guidance empowers head teachers to take the steps they see fit to limit the use of mobile phones in their schools. This includes implementing full bans if they feel that is required. A number of schools have updated or are reviewing their policies in light of the national guidance, which has now been in place for 7 months.
Pam Gosal.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Parents from my area of Bearsden have reached out to say that current guidance on the use of mobile phones does not go far enough, as phones can be used to distribute harmful content and distract pupils during class time. Even more shockingly, a teacher I spoke to said that phones were used to film female pupils using unisex toilets. Presiding Officer, parents do not get to choose what school their children go to and what policy is in place on mobile phones. I have stood here many times asking the Scottish Government why they are unwilling to act on this, why they refuse to listen to voices of the many concerned parents, and why they seem content to fail Scotland's pupils. But I will once again ask the Cabinet Secretary if she will listen to reason and ban the use of mobile phones in schools.
Cabinet Secretary.
And make sure that schools have single-sex toilets.
Hold on a second, Cabinet Secretary. Ms Gosal, it was quite clear I had asked you to come to your question. You were well over the time limit for questions. I'd called the Cabinet Secretary to speak. I would be grateful if at that point you would resume your seat. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It is because I did listen, as Cabinet Secretary, to parents and carers, to teachers, that we updated our mobile phone guidance in August of last year, only 7 months ago. That updated guidance goes as far as I am able towards a full-scale ban. And I think I need to remind the member that the Scottish Government cannot unilaterally ban mobile phones. Scottish ministers do not have the power to do so. I do hear the passion from Ms Gosal in relation to the use of mobile phones in schools. I had to contend with it myself as a teacher. I recognise the challenge. I would invite the member to interrogate the updated guidance that published 7 months ago. I know a range of schools across Scotland already have a full-scale ban, but some head teachers argue a more nuanced approach is more suitable for their school. And fundamentally, my position as Cabinet Secretary is that I trust Scotland's head teachers to get it right for the children that we entrust in their care every day. But if Ms Gosal has specific concern in relation to the updated guidance we published in August, I'm more than happy to correspond with her or to meet with her on that point.
Thank you. I'm going to need briefer questions, but also briefer responses. Cabinet Secretary. Briefly, Bob Doris.
Presiding Officer, I acknowledge the updated guidance. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary where the voice of young people is within this debate and how schools, local authorities and government should listen to young people who are actually those most impacted quite often by the misuse of mobile phones in schools?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think it's hugely important that we listen to the views of young people in relation to this issue. The school at which we launched the updated guidance in August had taken a really dynamic approach to involving the children in mining their own mobile phone use and their classroom teachers to analyse the amount of time they all spent online. As a result of that process, they got buy-in from the school pupils, they got buy-in from the parents and carers and from the teaching staff. So consulting children on changing policies that will ultimately impact on them is hugely important.
Briefly, Ash Regan.
Sir, in light of the really remarkable improvements at Berwickshire High School, where banning mobile phones in all school buildings has led to rising attainment, better behaviour and a significant reduction in bullying, does the Minister not agree that this demonstrates the clear educational benefits of mobile-free learning environments that I believe, and many I think across this chamber believe, should be a national policy on mobile
Ash Regan,
use?
please resume your seat. I will make the same point to you as I did to Ms Gosal. When I've called somebody else to speak, you do need to resume your seat. Cabinet Secretary, briefly, please.
Well, I agree with Ms Regan, there can be educational benefits, but of course I remind Ms Regan, as I have reminded Ms Gosal, that the Government does not and cannot unilaterally ban mobile phones. The guidance that we have published in August goes as far as we are able to at the current time And if Ms Regan would like to correspond with me on this issue, I'm more than happy to write to her or to meet with her in relation to her passion on this topic.
Question 2, Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to expand dyslexia support in schools to remove any barriers for children who need the right support to thrive.
Cabinet Secretary.
We are committed to improving the experiences of children and young people with dyslexia. The Additional Support for Learning Act places duties on education authorities to identify, provide for and review the additional support needs of their pupils. Our national approach to dyslexia focuses on early identification. We are working with Dyslexia Scotland and local government to continue to improve the frequency of consistency of early identification through the use of the Addressing Dyslexia Toolkit Dyslexia Identification Pathway. And the 25-26 budget also set out an additional £29 million of investment for ASN, which I hope will be welcomed by members.
Rona Mackay.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Investment and meaningful support for dyslexic individuals and young people with additional support needs are fundamental to getting it right for every child, an important commitment made by this Government. Yet too many dyslexic children are slipping through the net. This has been highlighted by a report published by Dyslexia Scotland in collaboration with the University of Glasgow. Can the Minister confirm if the recommendations within that report will be considered?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I agree the findings within the recent report are concerning, and we agree that those with dyslexia should be supported in both educational and professional settings. At the end of last year, I visited Roseburn Primary School to see how enhanced support for learners with dyslexia from teachers and pupil support staff with the right skills and knowledge has made a huge difference in ensuring children and young people with dyslexia are supported appropriately. We are also currently exploring options to strengthen the existing professional learning opportunities for our education staff on additional support for learning. That includes on dyslexia. And we've also committed to undertaking an analysis of learning hours that are attributed to additional support for learning content in our ITE teaching programmes across Scotland.
Question 7, Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to support school pupils with dyslexia.
Cabinet Secretary.
As part of our partnership approach to improve the educational experience of children and young people with dyslexia, we work closely with Dyslexia Scotland and Education Scotland to support their work with local authorities and schools. The Scottish Government grant fund Dyslexia Scotland £200,000 per year to have a positive and an enabling impact on the educational provision for children with dyslexia and those who support them.
Fulton McGregor.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Recently, I have joined the cross-party group in dyslexia and would take this opportunity to pay tribute to the work that they do. I've also had some positive discussions with Paul McNeill, an ambassador for Dyslexia Scotland, about the need for further supports for children in schools. So on that note, can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if she would consider convening or indeed being part of a round-table discussion including Dyslexia Scotland, Education Scotland, COSLA, the Association of Directors of Education in Scotland and any other relevant stakeholders to agree on a framework solution to support dyslexic children better in our education system?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I very much recognise that there's more work that needs to be done to help ensure that consistency of appropriate and timely support is in place for our children and young people with dyslexia across Scotland. Following my meeting with Dyslexia Scotland in January, I discussed this matter with COSLA and have agreed to issue a joint letter to all education authorities on best practice for supporting children and young people. This will include information on the value of adopting the agreed Scottish working definition of dyslexia, the dyslexia identification pathway within the toolkit itself, the free professional learning modules that are available for teachers to enhance their knowledge and skills, and the professional recognition programme on dyslexia and inclusive practice. I'd be happy to keep members and the cross-party group informed of the progress in this area.
Supplementary, Miles Briggs.
Deputy Presiding Officer, today's Audit Scotland report into additional support for learning sets out a pretty challenging picture for both teachers and schools. The report states Scottish Government and councils must fundamentally rethink how they plan, fund and staff additional support for learning as part of core school education in Scotland. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if the Scottish Government accept the recommendations from this report, and will ministers urgently come forward with a plan on how these recommendations will now be actioned?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I welcome Audit Scotland's report on additional support for learning. It is challenging to the Government and I accept that as Cabinet Secretary. I do, though, want to meet with the Auditor-General alongside COSLA to ensure that we have a partnership approach to responding to the challenge put to Government. So I hope Miles Briggs recognises the seriousness in which I am taking this report in relation to our investment in additional support for learning, but also, I think, to parents and carers and children and young people's experience of what that feels like on the ground. To my mind, we need to better understand that And that's one of the critiques within the report. It's about the granularity and the transparency, actually, in relation to the spend and how we quantify that. I am particularly interested in pursuing this further with the Auditor-General, because I think he raises a really important point in terms of public spending. And of course, there is significant funding being provided to support additional support needs in our schools. So I welcome the challenge, and I will continue to engage with the Auditor-General on this and be more than happy to engage with Mr Briggs on this matter too.
Thank you. Question 3, Michael Manna.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with the Scottish Funding Council regarding the University of Dundee.
Minister Graham Day.
Along with my officials, I have been in regular contact with the Scottish Funding Council on the situation at the University of Dundee. I have also met with the senior management team at the university in recent weeks. I fully understand this is an anxious time for staff and students, but it's imperative that the university brings forward a robust financial recovery plan and does so in close and ongoing engagement with staff in line with Fair Work principles. The Funding Council will undertake detailed expert analysis of the university's financial recovery plan once it is finalised and provide advice to the Scottish Government on next steps to support the university. The member will of course be aware the Finance Secretary set out in this Government's commitment to support our universities, including the University of Dundee, with £50 million of financial transactions that will be available to the SFC.
Michael Manna.
I thank the Minister for that answer. What Parliament and the people in Dundee really need to know is the status of that £15 million loan that was set out here in the Chamber by the Cabinet Secretary. Because I know from my engagements with the university that that money is not going to touch the size of the black hole. So can the Minister lay out clearly what figures he has seen that led his government to announce that particular sum of money to Parliament on Tuesday?
Right now, it's difficult to be definitive on the way forward for the University of Dundee for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is the finalising of the financial recovery plan, which, as I indicated, the SFC will consider. The SFC are presently actively engaged with the institution on receiving, in the first instance, a high-level and working draft of which can then be examined. I understand absolutely the frustration and anger of staff and students at the time it's taken to provide transparency on the scale and nature of the financial problems, how those arose and how it's proposed they will be addressed. But equally, it's important that the picture which emerges is entirely accurate and that the recovery plan which is proposed has the potential to restore the university to a sustainable position, minimise redundancies insofar as it's possible, and seeks to ensure the institution's significant contribution both to the local economy and the overall higher education and research offer in Scotland is maintained. I'm conscious of time. This week's announcement in the budget of the provision of additional funding to the SFC for the purpose of supporting institutions such as University of Dundee is a clear sign that the Government is prepared to support the provision of assistance. It is going to enable the SFC to help the University of Dundee through the immediate challenges it faces and afford breathing space to shape a recovery plan which is credible in delivery. And the SFC will be assessing matters further as the information I mentioned earlier comes forward.
Thank you. I've got a number of colleagues that want to ask supplementaries. They will need to be brief, and obviously the Minister, on the back of that latest response, the answers will need to be a bit briefer too. First, Joe Fitzpatrick.
President Officer, unlike Mr Mara, I not only welcome the £15 million funding, I voted for it. It is really important that we can develop a recovery plan that supports the university's reputation for as a global centre of excellence in teaching and research. I think that has to be done in collaboration with the staff and workforce. Does the Minister agree?
Minister.
I do agree with that. I mean, Mr Fitzpatrick will recognise that there is a process being worked through, and I would actively encourage the university and trade unions to engage constructively in dialogue to seek a resolution in all of this. And to be clear, consultation should include being open to considering any credible alternative cost-saving measures that are brought forward as part of that process.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, President Officer. The SFC loan will almost entirely go to Dundee, but this week Steve Olivier of RGU warned that institutions face a major existential threat due to significant underfunding. Neil Cowie at Nescol said, "We're constantly being asked to do more with less, and that is simply not sustainable." So what help will be announced for institutions such as these? Or will the Minister risk the existential threat becoming reality?
Minister.
I note from Liam Kerr's contribution, he didn't mention Sir Peter Matheson. But Peter Matheson at the Edinburgh University made a number of points about the challenges his institution has faced, and he particularly highlighted the contribution that the immigration rhetoric and policies of the last Tory UK government have made in the form of international student numbers. These are exacerbating the problems that our institutions are facing. There is a raft of challenges there. In answer to a specific point, the SFC and the Scottish Government is alive to and engaging, particularly with the university sector, on the challenges that they face.
Okay, and briefly, Willie Rennie.
So just following up Michael Mara's question, I'm interested in how the £15 million was alighted upon. And if the plan that is developed by the university indicates that more money is required in order to secure a smooth transition, will he arguing with the Finance Secretary and the First Minister for more money to be available to avoid big job losses?
As I said to Willie Rennie, to Michael Mara, apologies, the announcement earlier this week was predicated on an approach that looks to provide the University of Dundee with that breathing space to bring forward a credible plan for its recovery. And as I also said to Michael Mara, on the back of that information and other information coming forward, the SSC will assess what's in front of them and consider how we proceed from there.
And Maggie Chapman.
Fair Work principles, Fair Work principles are central to good workplace conditions and culture, but with trade unions continuing to be excluded from meaningful engagement and participation in the development of the recovery plan, the UEG isn't upholding these principles. Can the Minister confirm whether it is his expectation that staff will be involved in the development of the recovery plan, not just presented with it after it has been drawn up by others?
Minister.
I think, as I said earlier, Presiding Officer, what I expect to happen is that a draft recovery plan will come forward. And, of course, at that point, I would expect staff to be afforded, or at least the representatives, to be afforded the opportunity to bring forward what hopefully will be credible alternative proposals, and these should be given appropriate consideration.
Question 4, Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it is supporting pupils with additional support needs in the Motherwell and Wishaw constituency.
Cabinet Secretary.
Local authorities oversee the delivery of education and have a statutory duty to identify, provide for and to review the support that they provide for pupils with additional support needs. Spending on additional support for learning by local authorities has reached a record high of over £1 billion in 23-24. In addition, the 25-26 budget sets out a further £29 million of additional investment for ASN. Funding from this will go to councils across Scotland, including North Lanarkshire Council, and will support local and national programmes focused on recruitment and retention of the ASN workforce.
Claire Adamson.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer, and underlying the fact that the onus is on the local authority to identify pupils. But casework through my office indicates that many parents and carers in Motherwell and Wishaw are not aware of coordinated support plans. They will be offered a personal plan, an education plan, a GIRFEC plan, any kind of plan that doesn't have the statutory underpinning of a coordinated support plan. So can the Cabinet Secretary outline the importance of making CSP arrangements for children and young people in my constituency with additional support needs a priority for the local authority, and how can parents address this issue?
Cabinet Secretary.
So our education authorities do have a legal duty to have arrangements in place to identify children and young people with additional support needs who require a coordinated support plan, and arrangements for a CSP need to be put in place to enable that crucial individual support and those interventions to be planned in a coordinated way, where we've got multiple agencies, for example, working together to supporting a child or young person. Now, members will be aware that the Education, Children and Young People Committee carried out an inquiry into additional support for learning last year, and in response I committed to including further clarity within the refreshed Additional Support for Learning Code of Practice and on the relationships between the CSP and other plans within a staged intervention model. And I think that's hugely important in terms of communication with parents and carers. But as part of our work through the ASL Action Plan, we're also developing a national professional learning resource and accessible information and guidance on CSPs for children, young people, parents and carers.
Very briefly, Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Deputy Presiding Officer, the report today said of the Government's project board that it's made limited progress and the action plan doesn't address resourcing issues. And predictably, the Cabinet Secretary has just, of course, passed the buck to local authorities. But here's what the report said on that. Funding allocations for councils do not reflect the ASL legislation, the presumption of mainstreaming or the continued growth in recorded ASN. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, what on earth is she and her team doing, and when will she take responsibility for this dismal failure to Scotland's children with additional support needs?
Cabinet Secretary.
I regret, I think, the tone with which that question was put, because, of course, there are real challenges in Scotland's schools at the current time, and it would be far more beneficial for Scotland's children and young people if parties were able to work together in relation to responding to those challenges. And I heard the member complain about resources, and I remind the member, of course, that she and her party voted to abstain on the Scottish Government's budget, which provided for which provided for an extra £29 million of investment for additional support needs. So she wants to come to the Chamber and complain about resourcing. She might want to change her voting record in the future to support that extra investment to make sure it goes to those who need it most.
Question 5, Michelle Thompson.
To ask the Scottish Government what roles the Skills Transition Centre at Forth Valley College will play in protecting and redeploying the skills base and providing further training opportunities for a just transition of workers in the Grangemouth chemical cluster.
Minister Graham.
President Officer, we've been clear that every measure must be taken to support the workforce at Grangemouth. The Skills Transition Centre is the first project to be delivered through the Falkirk and Grangemouth Growth Deal with £4 million of investment from the Scottish Government. The centre will provide state-of-the-art equipment and facilities for Forth Valley College to provide training both now and for future generations to respond to the needs of Grangemouth and emerging sectors as part of the net zero transition. The college is a critical partner for us as the provider for the skills intervention funding for the refinery workforce.
Michelle Thompson.
I thank the Minister for that response. Now, given the leading role of Forth Valley College that they will play in the skills transition process, it will be vitally important that the college can both assess and then ensure the capacity is in place to deliver on the demand and at pace. How are the Scottish Government supporting them to ensure delivery?
Minister.
Forth Valley College was identified as the lead partner in the Skills Transition Centre because of their ability to deliver in response to the transitioning workforce, and we look forward to continuing to develop this offering in the months ahead. We're actively working with Forth Valley College and wider partners across the Grangemouth Future Industry Board to understand what additional skills-focused activity is needed and exactly how it will be provided, because we must ensure that whatever is required is available.
Question 6, Sharon Dowie.
Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what action it is taking to deal with violence in schools.
Cabinet Secretary.
Violence towards pupils or school staff is completely unacceptable. We published our joint action plan with COSLA last August. The plan sets out 20 actions to be taken by 2027, including a number of actions to reduce violence in our schools. We've published new guidance on gender-based violence, updated our guidance on mobile phones and anti-bullying, and provided extra funding to help support training of support staff who often deal with the most challenging behaviour in our schools. We committed to report annually on progress of delivery against the plan. The first progress report will be published in the coming weeks.
Dowie.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Violence in schools is rising, but the SNP has left teachers, parents and the police feeling powerless to help young victims. Yet violent pupils feel safe in the knowledge they are unlikely to face any significant consequences. At a recent summit on youth violence, young people who were victims told us they felt forgotten. They had to change classes, they had to restrict their movements, they had to change their subject choices, while the perpetrators faced no consequences for their actions. Cabinet Secretary, schools should be places for learning, not for living in fear. What specific actions has the Scottish Government taken since that summit to improve the safety of our youngsters in schools and give teachers the power they need to remove those causing disruption? Cabinet
Secretary.
I thank Sharon Dowie for her question. She and I attended the same summit and we heard the same stories, and I very much recognise the challenge here, and I absolutely agree with her that our schools should be places of learning. And most schools are places of learning every single day. But I accept there are also challenges in some of our schools and in some of our classrooms, and we need to respond as a government, but also at local level to help respond to that challenge. I think the member's point relates to consequences, and I do just want to put on the record that our existing policy framework, including our national policy on exclusion, does not prevent the use of consequences. But we have heard consistently, and we heard this at the meeting, at the event that we both attended at the summit, that is not necessarily people's experience on the ground. As I alluded to in my original response, we will provide an update in relation to consequences in the coming weeks on the action plan that I published in August. I think that will give the member greater clarity on consequences, but again, Presiding Officer, I'm happy to meet with the member on this, because the challenge she and I heard at that summit was very real, and I think it's important that government and local government respond accordingly to that challenge.
Thank you, and apologies to those that were seeking supplementaries, but we do not have time and need to move on to question 8. Claire Hawkey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the impact of the rise in employer national insurance contributions on local authority partnership, early learning and childcare settings.
Minister Natalie Dawn-Ennis.
Through my regular engagement with the childcare sector, I am keenly aware of the concerns about the UK Government's changes to employer national insurance contributions. Our estimates indicate these changes will add £5 million per year to partner providers' costs. for the delivery of funded ELC. The First Minister and COSLA President welcomed the support of childcare sector reps when they wrote to the Chancellor in January, calling again for the Treasury to meet the costs for Scottish public services in full. The Scottish Government will continue to advocate for the interests of funded ELC providers at every opportunity.
Claire Hawley.
Thank the Minister for that answer. A partnership nursery in my Rutherglen constituency has estimated that the impact of changes to national insurance, coupled with wage rises their staff rightly deserve, will cost approximately £2,500 per employee. Would the Minister agree with me that it is deeply regrettable that the UK Labour Government voted to specifically exclude an exemption from the rise in employer national insurance contributions from early learning and childcare settings, significantly adding to their costs, especially given their vital contribution to the education of Scotland's children?
Minister.
Absolutely. I would fully agree that there is much to regret in the UK Government's increase to employer national insurance contributions, and I fully appreciate the concern among providers in relation to this rise in costs. Early learning and childcare is only one of many vital public services that are delivered in the public, private and third sectors, and we estimate the UK Government's increase could add over £700 million to the costs of public services in Scotland. The Scottish Government has been clear that the Treasury must fully fund these costs. However, they've indicated we will instead receive a much lower value Barnett share of spending in England. We maintain that additional support must go beyond a simple Barnett share and recognise the differing size and configuration of public services in Scotland. Given the potential impact for charities, the health and care sector and businesses, the UK Government should have looked across the range of tax powers at their disposal before pushing through this increase to employer national insurance contributions.
And very briefly, Ros McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Look, urgent action to tackle underfunding in the sector, which is seeing staff turnover rate far higher than it should be, is desperately needed. So can the Minister tell us what more she's doing with the PVI sector to address the continuing disparity when it comes to private nurseries versus state nurseries?
Minister. Absolutely. As set out in the draft budget, we will provide an additional £9.7 million to local authorities to support an increase in the pay of childcare workers in the private and third sector. Over and above that, the member will be aware of the ongoing work in relation to the Sustainable Rates Review. Full implementation of these changes will be reliant on a cost collection exercise that is going to be undertaken in spring 25. This is going to look at things like bringing rates paid to childminders in line with other types of provision, setting a higher rate for 2-year-olds, staffing ratios and separating payments for free meals. I'm more than happy to continue discussing other ways we are supporting the PVI sector with the member if she wishes to do so.
Thank you very much. And again, with apologies to the members, I couldn't call for supplementaries. That concludes portfolio questions on education and skills. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next item of business to allow the front benches to change.